The podcast you're about to listen to is from a book series on post-qualitative, new materialist and critical posthumanist research. I'm Karen Murris and chief editor of this new Routledge series. You can find it on the following website, www.postqualitativeresearch.com. This recording is from Edge Entanglements with Mental Health Allyship Research and Practice, a Postqualitative Cartography by Tim Barlott and Jenny Setchell.
Welcome. I'm Tim Barlott, one of the authors of Edge Entanglements, and I'm in conversation with Jenny Setchell, the other author of the book, and Paint Fremmerlid, a queer, mad artist and poet. We're in the middle of an experimental dialogue about the book, using a tarot deck that was created by Paint as a creative stimulus for our conversation. Our conversation has turned to chapter 8 of the book, which is about becomings, when rigid structures break down and transform into something else. What brought us here was a conversation about disrupting axes of power in relationships and the softening of relational hierarchies. Paint, can you mind just saying again a little bit more about this Adult of Leaves?
Sure. Yeah. I don't know what inspired this particular drawing. I think it was just like I really wanted it to express like the care that goes into creating like a safe place for someone, or like that kind of motherly energy is a little bit there too. And I think that there's like so much work that we have to do sometimes to create that nest or that bubble for somebody else. I've definitely worked in the field as well, providing different types of care to people, and it's incredibly like taxing, right? Like this person's doing two things at once, trying to create this and protect this bubble, right? And the baby doesn't know the difference between them doing one thing or a bunch of things because they're just safe and resting. And hearing the description of the chapter again and thinking about it, it really reminds me of queer community in the way that like I've had to build my own networks of care and relationships and friendships, especially as like things that I think would help me, services that I think would help me are either hard to access or not available to me. And so like I really, really depend on my relationships with other people. So that like it speaks a lot to me personally too.
And after hearing you say that and thinking about the chapter and this idea of careful and careless generosity that coexists, that really ties into the other cards. So the Teen of Leaves, we're talking about boundaries, the Six of Candles being communities of care and support. That the idea of careful or careless generosity in the book was looking at how in these relationships that there was a carelessness, there was a disregard for what might be expected, a disregard for how relationships should be, a disregard for what family should look like, what kin should be like, and this almost a defiant a defiancy in selecting family of choice and kinship of choice. And then in contrast to that was this careful generosity. So there's a carelessness in the relationships where there's a disregard for convention, but then there's this carefulness where there's this vigilant attention for doing something that's life-giving for the other, or being in a relationship that's life-giving. So it really kind of ties into all of the cards that we pulled.
And I think, again, to return to that concept of binaries and moving beyond them, one might think that careless and careful are kind of opposites or something like that, but we're not certainly using them in those ways, and that we're suggesting that perhaps both are helpful in ally relationships, that a careless, like you're saying, Tim, not being vigilant about particular social norms in constructing the relationships around someone who's experiencing psychiatrization at that time. That carefulness, so that's something about fullness, and in that generosity, the use of the word generosity is, it can sit alongside and with that carelessness as well, when conceptualised in the way that you were just speaking about it then the chapter goes into.
I want to bring another emotion to the conversation, and you can let me know if there's a chapter that maybe suits this best that we can redirect to. But another emotion that I get when I look at this Adult of Leaves is I think about the longing for those more just relationships and the longing to have a supportive care network, to experience more equity in how we're experiencing life.
I think that probably speaks to the next chapter, which is about desire, or we could at least speak to that perhaps too.
Yeah, I think that chapter 9 on desire, and chapter 10 also. But yeah, how about we talk about desire first? And to quote from the book, we say that desire is not only a human need or want, but any vital force, human or non-human, that propels creativity.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. If you would like to know more about this chapter, please visit the website www.postqualitativeresearch.com, and please stay tuned for future podcasts.